Start with ultramarine blue in the sky, touch of cerulean, more than a touch, run that across. I'm going to leave in behind those trees, there's some white patches, so I'm just going to leave little parts of the sky, horizontal shapes, just going to leave them white. I'm washing my brush now, taking it down, just using water along the edge of the land, where the land meets the sky, plain water. What's going to happen there is the blue from that sky is going to just bleed down into the area of plain water. A couple of little bits there. Now, to soften the edge, I finished that, but I can see it's becoming a very sharp edge between the colour and the white paper. So I just put a bit of water on my brush, dry it off a touch, and then run it along the white areas, the paper areas, and that will allow the paint to bleed down into the white. And that's what you call softening. That's called softening the edge. Some people call it lost and found edges. That's a lost edge. These are found edges, so I'm going to just lose them. I'll put a little bit of water on those as well. Now, fun things start to happen. I don't know if you can see it very clearly. The sky starts to go crazy when you put water into it. So I've got reverse water pushing back up, I've got the paint pushing down, and the whole thing is moving around a little bit. And that's the beauty of watercolour, you just let that happen. And then you end up with some fantastic patterns and shapes that you wouldn't have thought to paint. So I'm going to leave a gap here. If I put the earth, the trees in along there straight away, it'll suck up into the sky and it'll spoil the shape of the mountains and the land. So what I do is leave that gap clear, and I'll put blue down in here, this section now. I'll go for a slightly greener blue, even if I have to mix a touch of yellow into the blue to make it a little bit greener. That's more like an aqua, teal colour. So I'm running that along there. Once again, I wash my brush. I'm halfway through the shape. I'm washing my brush, and I'm going to use clear water for the bottom half. And just let that come down to clear. At the moment I'm thinking it's a sharp graduation. I'd rather see it more gradual. So what I'm going to do is put a little bit more blue on my brush, and I'm going to run it across here in this lower section, just like that. Now I'll let that go, I'll see what happens. There's a couple of spots there I'm not real happy about. I'll just see what starts to happen there. What I might do is wipe my brush, no more water, just dry brush now. Run it across and suck that up. There we go. Now I'm going to tie that. Now I've got two different shades of blue in the water. Not real happy with that, so I'm going to try and blend it together with a dark colour along the back edge again. Nice and slow, just to trace that edge of sand. Alright, that'll do. So now I've virtually got three different colours of blue in the one. Well, if you're just beginning, you might think, oh, the water's blue, I'll just choose one colour and put it in. But the more colours you can add to an area, the more different shades of what the one colour, say That's a blue, a blue, a blue. They're all different. That one's got a little bit of green in it. That one's got a little bit of pink in it. So it just looks good. It's just the trick of the trade to vary the different shades of colour within what looks like originally is one colour area. So now I'm just choosing a little bit of the orangey red colours, warm colours. Make sure you can see that okay. Now I'm going to bring, ignoring the trees, just in the background there I've got a very pale colour on my brush. I'm just going to fill that in. Now I'm making a little bit, as I come forward or down the page, I'm going to make it a little bit stronger each time, but not too strong. I've mixed it up too strong, I have to go back in there and weaken it down a little bit. I'm just going to fill this whole path. Don't want it to go totally to red, in fact I want it to go more to a yellowy colour, so I'll add a bit of yellow now. Mix it round, wet it down, come back in before it dries. You have to do this all while it's still wet. You don't want any part of it to dry down here. Otherwise you'll end up with an edge. See, that's where I paused before, so I'll just go back up into that and put some horizontal lines. And because I want the edges of this pathway to be nice and dark, I'm just going, now while that's wet, I'm going to put some brown on my brush and just add it down the side there. Bibs and bobs, just touching it in, and the whole idea of that is it's going to bleed across into that sandy area. Just to encourage it to bleed across, I'll put some horizontal lines in. That'll be just dandy. Right, now as it dries it will lighten. That's the difference between watercolour and acrylic. Acrylic, when you put it on, same with the oils, they tend to stay the colour that you've applied. Watercolour gets paler and paler and lighter, and that, even though brown, it's actually my flesh colour. I'm just pausing a little bit, letting that dry out. Meanwhile, I'll just test to see how wet we are at the back. Touching it is a good indication of how wet you are. I'm very dry there now. So I'm going to come back and do that strip of land across the back using a greeny colour, and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of blue. Bright green wouldn't work back there, it's got to be a pale green with a bit of blue in it. Here we go. I'll start thin, using the tip of my brush, slowly thickening up. No straight lines here, just tapping it away so you get a rugged, wiggly line going across the top of the back, out to there. Now I'm going to strengthen that colour, going to add a bit more green and a bit more blue, make it stronger, using the very tip of the brush, just going to touch it along that patch, and that way it'll sink down and it'll give a nice dark edge on the bottom of those trees back there. That way it'll make them look like they're rounded off. If you put dark at the bottom, it looks like a shadow and it makes it look three-dimensional. I'm going to leave that sand back there as white. I think it looks rather nice. I might go back later and add a little bit of the warm tone to it, but I certainly can't touch that right now. I'm going to let those trees just do their own thing and grow into themselves. In a more advanced state, you could touch some browns into that, you could even touch some reds into that green. But because I'm doing a basic, simplistic painting, I'll just leave the green to do its own thing, and that dark and against the light is lovely. Now while that's drying, this part here's gone dry, so I can now do these rocks. So I'm going to mix up a suitable colour for rocks, and that's going to be believe it or not, a little bit of purple, and possibly, where's my purple? I'll mix it down here. But it's a purple grey, so I'm going to go for purple plus a brown. I'll get a good brown. And a bit of blue, because it's in the distance. Everything can have so. Blue, purple, I'll mix it up stronger. Brown, lots of brown there. So that's ended up being a purpley neutral colour. Now it's very strong there, so I'm going to tip my brush into the water just to wet it down a little bit to make it lighter. More water, lighter. And I'll start by just putting some little circles that have flat bottoms. Circle on the top, flattish bottom on the bottom. Not dead flat, just a slight curve on the bottom. And the trick here is to have them different sizes. So I'll do one big one there. Now I'm going to put some long streaks, because at the back there I can see there's some long areas where obviously the sand is sitting on top of the rock. Flat rock, and the sand is sitting on it. I'll run that into the side, mainly because you can't really see what's happening behind all those trees. Next stage would be, now that the front is touch dry, got a little bit of a buckle to the paper, I'm not worrying about that. I'm going to start adding the foliage along the front edges here. So very dark on this side, very light on that side, but I might just start light on both sides and then come in later with the dark. That's the trick with watercolour, you always start the palest and you end up with the darkest. Now, just going to fire up my brush with a bit of greenery, a bit of green, which is just a dull sap green. Actually, I might make it a little bit more interesting by adding I don't know what colour to add. I think I'll add a bit of orange to this green. It'll warm it up a bit. Yeah, that's better. Now I'm just going to, I'm not going edging the path with a very hard straight stroke. I'm coming in sideways and just doing little zigzags into the side of that path. I'll do the same on the other side. Looking at where the grasses are. I might just do that sort of a pattern. I'm going to leave that big shape there. I'll go round the edge of the rock. Can be, doesn't have to be exact. And then once again, I'll bleed that out onto the path. As it's turned out, I've added a little bit more orange to this green, so that makes it a little bit warmer, which is fine because that's the side that the sun's hitting. This is in shadow, that's in the sun. So I'll just take a couple of little strokes up like that. And I'll put some more over this side. A little bit in front of the rock. Come back to that in a little while. Okay. Just looking at this painting, I think I might just darken, now that that's lightened, it's dried and lightened off, just going to darken over there for a little while I paint down the front here. A couple of things I could do now is lighten up that sand at the back, well, warm it up I should say. I'm mixing a little bit of red, yellow. I'm not being specific about what colours I'm using because, let's face it, it doesn't always matter. I'm just going to run in tiny little tip here and there, a little bit of a hint of the sand, not doing it totally all over. I'll wash my brush out and then I'll drag out the rest of that. It's like you put a little bit of colour on and then you stretch it out so that it lasts all the way around there like that. and I leave little bits and pieces. I leave a little bit coloured, a little bit white. I don't go back and try and colour it all in. Sometimes it's best just to leave it be halfway done, and that looks more interesting to the eye. I'm going to darken, I'll leave that now because I've put the wet sand in. I don't want to put colour beside that. I might come around here first and just darken up these rocks, the underneath section of the rocks. And for that I'm going to choose a lovely purple and throw some dark brown burnt umber into that purple, and it will still match and it'll look like a lovely shadow. Just going to use the very edge of this brush and put it underneath. It actually is, the sun is coming this way, so theoretically I should be putting the shadow on the water side of the rock, so I'll do that. That way the brain doesn't say, hang on, something's wrong here. A few taps. Variation in colour, all good. It's going to be mainly hidden by the trees in the front soon, once that dries off. There are some more rocks in the distance. It's so hard to see, it's not worth putting them in. So now I'm going to do some very dark foliage at the front here, and I'll get my green as a basis, and I'll put a fair bit of purple, burnt umber. In the end you'll notice I don't need a lot of colours in my painting. Burnt umber might be better. It's very dark. So I'm going to start putting it in where the shadows are. I'm looking here at this colour here. A bit here. Could add a bit of blue to this as well. There you go. Touching blue in while it's wet. I've got a little edge on this pad which is annoying me. I should have maybe cut that off. But that's it. I'll keep painting. I'm going very, very dark. Now this is where you need the beautiful quality, artist's quality watercolour paint. Very hard to get dark colours when you're using cheaper paints. I'm going to wash that brush out and leave it for a time being. I'm going to come to a brush that's like this one. It's a chisel, what I call a chisel shape. And once again, too wet. If I dry it off a bit, I can get some nice thin grassy shapes, like blades of grass almost. With each stroke I get 10 or 12 blades of grass, so it's good quality. Economical, I should say. Okay, so I'm just picking off some of the areas there. Random, you could practice this on a spare piece of paper. Random little pieces of pulling up. Now I'm going to go back to my bigger brush. Oh no, I don't know what I might use now. I'll use this number 6 Sable. It's a round haired brush, and it's they say Sable. You could use a synthetic. I'll go back into that dark colour I had before, which was purple and burnt umber, very dark brown, and blue. So that to me is almost a black, bluey black. Getting the proportions right. Keep adding the different colours till you get them just right. And for me, I'll turn that page over so you can see what I'm going to. It's a sort of a blue. It's a dull blue. It's a dark dull blue. Now I'm going to be doing some shadows across the ground on this. So I'm going to paint these shadows, a little bit of a squiggle and another shadow. So using my finger down as a guide, just thin right across, one go like that, couple of little goes like this, just following what I see there. A few spots, I can see spots which are actually leaves. And then I'm going to go right across the yard, or right across the path with this one brush there. Like that, come out, make a couple of little branches. It's just like a tree has fallen on the ground. On the ground there. Right. Now, go back to my little chisel. Areas that are shaded using the same colour, just going to sort of touch them in. Little spots here and there, not equal distance, all random from each other. Like put 2, 3, 2, put 1. Try and keep it asymmetrical, any shapes that you make like this. Now I've washed my brush, I've dried it off, and I'm dragging a dry brush through those shapes. Looking at the different colours I have here, there's lots of different, there's oranges, there's greens, all very fine. If you half close your eyes, it's very, very pale in general, not dark. So I'm going to put some different colours in there. I'm going to go a bit bold. I'm going to add a little bit of orange. And I'll put it in a random way. Just dab, drag, dab, drag, dab, drag, like that. I'm going to get some green, quite a bright green, put it in, bright compared to the green I used behind. Once again, dab, drag, dab, drag, go over the top of the yellow a little bit, load up again, a couple of brushes down there, because I'm following these. It's easy to follow. If you follow the photo, you've got the guide. If you try and make it up, it'll start to get corny. We don't want corny, we want realistic. Now, my brush, I'm wetting my brush and drying it, and I'm going back into that paint with a sort of half an empty brush, and I'm diluting those colours down. So you put them in strong, and then you kind of pull them out again, you get rid of them. So I want strong, and now I don't want strong. So I'm going back in, and I'm just using my brush dry, wet it, like make sure it's clean, and then dry it off on the rag, and then tap it in, drag it around in patches. Follow my guide there, here and there, leaving that part dark. I want to leave that part dark, lightening up this area. So by doing that, you'll end up with interesting texture. Right, this side here has some brightness into it as well, so I'm just going to load the brush up quite strong with these little accent, I call them accents, tiny little bits of bright colour. The large areas to be dull and the tiny bits bright. Right, so I'm getting there. A couple of things I want to do. I do want to darken the edge of this pathway again. Now it's not quite the time. I want to make sure everything I've done there now dries without being interfered with. So I think now might be the time for me to place these trees in, because the paper has gone dry up here. I'm going to use a medium-sized brush, which is that number 6 Sable. And colour has to be almost black, so that'd be ultramarine brown. Oh, so ultramarine blue and burnt umber for brown. So dark blue, dark brown together, that makes black, providing your paints are rich, and that means artist quality. So I'm just going to paint this. Now I'm going to let the brush just hang in my fingers and drag it across, and then change direction like that. Okay. haven't held it real tight, I've just let it be really random. Now I have to do this crossover branch, which is kind of fun. Go like that, and then I'll bring that in like that, and then I'll do another one, which is off this one. It goes up like that, across. So basically once you start doing trees, you are in charge. You can do whatever shapes you want. There's a couple of basic things you need to think about. Is always keep the bottom fat and grounded, i.e. dark, something dark at the base like that, so that you know it's growing out of the ground, it's not just floating. Now this other tree I'm making up totally. I think I could probably use a fatter brush, but I'll just put this one on its side. So I'll do the two edges, come in, I'll get back to brown for this one I think. So this particular tree, I'll just run some branches out. As long as you go fat to thin, don't ever do a branch at the top that is fatter than something below it. Always got to go fat at the bottom, thinner above it. Two branches, two trees there now. These tiny little ones over here.
Still the way down that hill.
Someone talking out there. Now, there. Oh. Now this, even though you think that's a thin brush, that is way too thick for what I'm trying to do here. So I'm coming to this, my next brush, the fourth one, that is a rigger, very thin. When I wet it, it's very thin, thin. And sign writers use them. R-I-G-G-E-R. I think I talked about it in my previous painting. So anyway, I'm just going to start doing very thin brushes here that are come up. It's worth practicing trees on scraps of paper, getting all different shapes. You can just make it up. The trick is to keep it thick at the bottom and then thinner at the top. As long as they're thick at the bottom, and just put a couple of little stubs of grass underneath, because obviously it's the shadow forming underneath each tree that gives you those dark pieces of foliage. They're never light under trees, always dark. So, that said, the next job is the foliage. Now I'm not going to paint in little lumps, I'm just going to use a medium-sized brush, which is the Sable number 6. I'm going to load it up with similar colour to what I used on the trunks, only a little bit of green added in. So it's still going to be a dark colour, but just a bit of green in it, not a lot. I don't want it bright green, I want it a really dull green. So this main tree in the middle, I'm just going to roll around my brush that's been loaded up with the paint in a random way, not necessarily following the picture, I'm just making it up as I go along. So, and one tree overlaps the other tree, so this middle one is the main one with the foliage. I'm following the picture from that point of view, leaving lots of gaps, and hopefully not doing it evenly, doing it in an asymmetrical way. Do a bit more foliage over here. Right, now I'm going to lighten that green colour, because this side here, the foliage is much lighter. And for once, it might not look any good, but it's what's there, so I'm going to just do it and see what happens. So there's a different colour, just looks like a different colour tree, and all I'm doing is rolling the brush across. I'm not doing it sideways, I'm doing it like that, as if it's as if this is the branch and the leaves are sitting in the right direction for the way the branch is. There we go. Now, like in all watercolour things, less is more. Sometimes at this stage I can run my fingernail through if it's very dark. That will add a little bit of interest, but in that case, not too much. Once it starts to soak into the page, the fingernail or the scraping doesn't work very well. You need to have it very wet, very dark, and sitting on top of the page, ready to be scraped off. Once it soaks in, it stains the paper and you can't scrape it off. So we're getting here. I'm getting to a stage now where I go back to the rigger and I like to add fine detail. And I think I want to add a lot more detail here to this area. Because I didn't put detail in behind it, because I was covering it, now's the time to cover it. So I'll go to Burnt Umber, Ultramarine Blue. Once again, I'm just going to put in a whole stack of little branches here using as thin as I can get this brush. And some branches coming in from off camera. Now while I'm doing that, I'm going to represent the same thing underneath with a lot more detail down here. Crisscross, straight up and down, on an angle, sometimes smudging sideways. Now once again, keep that dark colour going out into this. So now I'm going dark on top of dark. That works. So you can either pat, 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 pat like this, or you can stroke for longer ones, stroke up for real grass, like long blades. As you get towards the front here, really long ones can come right up past your picture, like that. When I'm painting a normal landscape, I'll often end up with a couple of really big grasses at the front, right across the top of the painting. When I say the top, right across the front of the painting, as if the grasses were in my way. So I've concentrated dark shadows there. I've hardly done anything over this side, but I'll do a couple of little, got the shadow part there. Yet to do that rock. Poor old rock's been neglected. A lot of these blades are falling over on this side. Okay, so I'm going to come back in now and do that rock, and I'll use a brush that is about that size, I think. It's very pale grey, that rock, so I'm going to guess it's purple and a bit of green in there, just for the opposites. Two opposites are good things to paint. I'll do. Put a bit of colour down, wash the brush with a clean dry brush, scrape it around. Oh, I could probably add a bit more purple to that. Now, the purple that I'm using is very, very powerful and strong, so I've got to be careful. I keep knocking it back. So putting purple down into that, using the very corner of the brush now to make little shapes. A bit more of the green at the back. And I'll run it right to the top. Remembering you've still got to add the shape at the front. So curve your brush around. Just go in and just to make the texture, I'm drying my brush off completely, and I'm going to what I call scrumble back in, suck it up, take out any sharp edges that I don't want. I do want those sharp edges at the front there because they're just indicating where that moss is growing. I'm quite happy to leave that as it is. Now I'll just show you a trick or two. Wet brush, half dry, paint back into this tree and lift out some of that bark. Push down into it. It's a lovely paint. This is not soaking in, it's not staining the paper, it's sitting on the surface. Therefore you can pull it out, you can wet it, re-wet it and suck it up into your brush, and you end up with some slight light textures there that would be really hard to add from scratch. It would be fiddly. You get them in, but it'd be fiddly to do it the other way around. Better to paint the whole tree dark, then come back with your wet brush and suck out the centre part, just the centre. Leave the edges dark and the centre gets lightened, and that gives you that circle, that circumference, feeling of 3 dimension. Okay, so we're getting close to a finished painting. There's other things I could do. I could go back into some of these rocks, suck out the top edges to give them a bit more lightness on the top. And I'm just using, once again, a half dry brush, no paint on it, just water, dry it off, and then put it onto the paper and scrub it around a little bit, and you're actually lifting off the paint. Good fun. And you'll find you can make nice shapes because interesting things happen. Now, I still want to darken the edge of this path, and I'm a little bit worried about how to do it. I think I'll use an orange and a red. Got a lovely orange redness to there, but I want to make sure it's very, very pale. So I'm just going to zigzag. I'm doing a zigzag all the way down. Add a bit more colour at the front. Get stronger as I go with confidence. Right. Dry the brush off. Drag a little bit across the road. Oops. Here I've got a sharp edge there. I'll take that up, suck that out. Go backwards, there you go. This side also has got some, it's actually, I'm just going to add a little bit of coolness on this side. A little bit of, by that I mean, to the orange I'm adding a little bit of purple. Make it a little bit darker. Just painting the edges in. A little bit of that in the distance there. Blend it into that sand. A little bit of sand over the back there. I'll put that in there around the edge, seeing as I can see it. It's not hidden by those trees yet. Pretty good. So once again I'm going to come back with this long rigger, add interest. So that means for me adding interest means a couple of green, oops, bits of grass here, green up here. Quite happy to have it very, very strong at this stage. A bit more in there, a bit more down the front. Big long pieces. And then we've got some lovely tiny details back here of trees and branches. So now's the time to either have fun or to say to myself, I think I've done enough. Very hard to say that. Just going to add a little bit more here. Just a tiny hint of a tree going across there. Hint of branches there. I mean of leaves. Up the top of the trees, I'm just going to add some, how can I put it? Fun little bits of green up here. I've loaded my brush up with green at one end and dark green at the other end. I'm just going to scrumble that across to make those branches and leaves a bit more realistic. My page is curled up, not much I can do about that. That will flatten off later. Believe it or not, I iron my paintings. Don't iron many clothes, but I certainly iron my paintings, especially these sort of watercolours. Okay, so pretty much thinking that will be it for this stage, and a couple of little things that I might change. That sometimes when you see the photograph, this is a very pale rock and that's all very pale, but I'd like to make this rock a fair bit darker so that it's stronger in the actual painting. So I'll just mix up a nice dull grey, brown. I'm just going to put that at the base here and there of this rock. Wet the brush and drag that colour up. And I'll just put a few random shapes across the back to give it that look of shadow. The fact that there's lots of branches and leaves, what am I saying? There's grasses in front. I'm going to just darken these grasses. Even though here they're not dark, I'm going to make them very dark, just to balance this painting. So brown, blue, a touch of green. Kick it up with the brush, using the flat edge, occasionally across like that, up, and then up, and then I'll just kick it around. Wet the brush again, dry, and drag it over into the way of the path. I think that balances the painting a lot better than it was before. I might even add some dark up into that corner now, just yeah, like that. That defines the back of that rock a bit more. I'll just scrape those colours up. I do think that's much better. Thanks for watching. This paper will flatten off. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time. Oh, and if you like this, please give me a like and subscribe to my channel. That way you'll know when I've uploaded another one. You can download this particular picture from my website, which is shirleypeters.com. I'll put a link underneath this video. And you could download it, have a paint of it, and photograph it, and email it to me. On my website, I've got information on how you can make contact directly. I'd love to see some other people doing this particular view and see the different interpretations of it. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.